What if the galaxy's greatest threat didn't come from monsters or machines, but from the minds of ordinary humans? What if the deadliest weapon wasn't claws, acid, or quantum tech, but the refusal to fight fair? Welcome to HFY Sci-Fi Love and War Story. Here, we uncover the most forbidden truths in the universe. Stories erased from archives. Files marked classified for eternity. Tales where survival rewrites morality. And humanity is the glitch the galaxy never expected. These aren't legends. They're warnings. Because somewhere, beyond protocol and peace treaties, there are those who still whisper. When logic fails, call Earth. Let's dive into the truth behind the myths. And ask the question that scares the stars the most. What if we're the monsters they hope never return? The Galactic War Academy hovered in silence over a dying red star, its architecture a spiral of silver and crystal, orbiting like a shrine carved from forgotten time. Inside its great hall, hundreds of alien students gathered for their first day, creatures of scales and mist, stone and song, beings with no faces and others with too many. Their voices whispered in 100 frequencies, harmonizing like a strange choir of curiosity. Then the doors opened. Professor Zextral entered with 6 deliberate steps, each claw tapping against the obsidian floor. His chitinous shell gleamed under the hall's dome light, and his 8 black eyes surveyed the room like cold orbs of night. Silence fell immediately. Even the sentient clouds hovered still. "Welcome," he rasped, voice like gravel underwater, "to historical military ethics. This semester, we will study many important cases. But none more vital than Case Study 7X. A hush rippled through the rows. Zextral's clawed hand activated a holographic banner. Blood-red letters hovered in the air. The Human Exclusion Decree. In the front row, a shimmer of blue and green raised a glowing tendril. "Professor," asked Kirinav, a young Proximan with luminous scales, "why study humans? They come from one planet. Their technology is simple. Why does a single species deserve an entire decree?" The professor stopped. All 8 of his eyes turned to Kirinav, and the light in the hall dimmed slightly, as though the room itself leaned in. "That," said Zextral slowly, "is the right question." He walked along the edge of the dais, clicking his claws. "Humans are the only species banned from all galactic warfare. A decision made unanimously by the Council of 1,000 Worlds. No exceptions. No appeals." A current of unease slipped through the audience. Some looked confused. Others, unsettled. "But why?" Kirinav pressed again. The professor's eyes deepened in shade, shifting from black to violet. "The full answer is classified until your final year. Today, we study only the official reasons." When class ended, Kirinav remained seated, eyes narrowed. Thoughts churned beneath her calm surface. She stepped into the hallway, where the massive windows overlooked a nebula swirling with blue fire. Her reflection was lost in its depth. Behind her, 3 figures approached. "You ask interesting questions," said a voice like grinding crystal. It belonged to Moxel, a silicon-based being from Alderaan, whose body shimmered in fractal symmetry. "I am Thriss," buzzed another, a hive mind composed of thousands of tiny insectoids hovering as one shape. "And I am Baser," added a third, a gas form enclosed in a containment suit, swirling with purple mist. "From the Horsehead Nebula." Kirinav turned to face them, nodding. "I can't stop thinking about those humans. Why would the entire galaxy agree to ban them? They don't even have acid spit or claws." "My family's trading routes avoid Sol entirely," Moxel said, "but no one ever told me why." "The main library won't help," said Thriss, wings humming. "But I have cousins in the maintenance hive. They can access the restricted archives." The group stared at each other for a long moment. A silent agreement passed between them. "Are we really doing this?" Kirinav asked, her scales shimmering with low green light. "I want to know the truth," said Moxel. "We all do," Baser added, mist pulsing brighter. Thriss buzzed affirmatively. "For heads are better than one." That night, under a false moon in the Academy's artificial garden, they met again. The air smelled of ionized metal and memory. "My cousins found a way in," Thriss said, their shape-shifting with excitement. "We go tonight." Sneaking through the ancient corridors was easier than expected. The professors slept in energy cocoons. Security bots patrolled on predictable loops. Behind a statue of the first Chancellor General, they found the door. Inside, a hidden chamber, circular, lit by thousands of dim screens. The air buzzed with silence, as if the room knew it shouldn't be disturbed. "I'm connecting," said Thriss. Tiny bodies scattered across the panels, pressing buttons with synchronized precision. The screens came alive. Images. Text. Fragments. History. First contact, 300 years ago, Moxel read. Humans were watched before approached. Class 3 civilization, Kirinav muttered. Not advanced. Physically unimpressive. Slow. Weak. Yet feared, Baser added, pointing at a redacted paragraph. Why? There's something called the Mars incident, said Kirinav. Mentioned 7 times. Never explained. Look here, Thriss buzzed, protocol violation, extreme prejudice. They looked at each other. No answers. Only darkness shaped like secrets. They copied everything they could before fleeing. But when they returned to the light, the shadows had followed them. Tiny surveillance drones floated near the ceiling, watching. Listening. We're being tracked, Baser said softly. That means we're close, Kirinav whispered, eyes glowing. Closer than they ever imagined. The Academy slumbered under false starlight. Its great towers, once glowing with knowledge, now loomed like silent sentinels watching the 4 shadows slipping through its ancient veins. Kirinav led, her scales darkened to absorb the ambient glow. Behind her floated Baser in a vaporous hush, Moxel glinting like fractured glass, and Thriss a shifting swarm that whispered as it moved. The corridors were empty, but not dead. The walls vibrated faintly, an old hum, alive and aware. Behind the statue of Chancellor General Varellos, they found the door. It was not marked, but Thriss's cousins had mapped its pulse. A single pressure node, hidden beneath a panel, opened it with a soft mechanical sigh. Cold air met them like breath from a forgotten machine. The room beyond was round, carved in concentric circles of shadow and flickering light. Thousands of screens lined the walls, off, but watching. I'm interfacing now, buzzed Thriss. Tiny insectoids split off, zipping toward the central console like a fluid mind unraveling. One by one, the screens blinked awake. File names scrolled in alien tongues. Battle reports. Species assessments. Redacted communications. Human entries glowed blood orange. Mars incident, Moxel read aloud. Referenced multiple times, but the files are corrupted. No, not corrupted, Kirinav murmured. Erased. Deliberately. Her tendril pointed at blocks of pure black text, edges too clean, too perfect. Here's another, said Baser. Protocol violation, extreme prejudice. Repeats across a dozen campaigns. His mist trembled inside the suit. This isn't ordinary warfare, Thriss added. These aren't just tactics. They're violations. Moxel flickered with unease. And yet the Council archived them, kept them beneath this place. Why preserve what they pretend never happened? Kirinav stared at a looping video fragment. It showed nothing more than boots, human boots, walking across a scorched battlefield. The audio was muted. But in the background, alien banners burned. They copied what they could. Only fragments, names, code phrases. Nothing whole. Whatever truth had once lived here, someone had long since bled it dry. As they exited, the air felt denser. The hall seemed narrower, listening. We can't go back to class like nothing happened, Moxel said. We need more. Someone who saw it, Kirinav replied. Not just files. She turned without thinking, feet carrying her to a hallway rarely used, lined with walls of memory metal and ancient roots from the Academy's living foundation. At the end, Professor Zekstral's office. The door creaked open. He was there, beneath a flickering light, eyes already locked on them. His 8 limbs were folded in stillness, but his gaze was fire. "You've been somewhere you should not go," he said, voice low. "We need answers," Karenav said simply. "You served with them. With humans." Zekstral did not blink. Did not rise. But the air changed. They were ordinary, at first, he began, slowly. Clumsy. Small. Curious. Like children with sharp sticks. And then the fighting started. The lights in the office dimmed as if reacting to memory. Zekstral's shell creaked as he shifted his weight. They shouldn't have survived. Not with what we gave them. We placed them on the front lines. We expected them to stall the enemy, to absorb losses while we regrouped. And, asked Moxel, barely above a whisper. They came back, Zekstral rasped. Time and again. Fewer, but smarter. Changed. They'd learned the terrain. Learned the enemy. Learned us. He leaned forward now, voice dropping to a hiss. I watched them build weapons out of nothing. I watched them lose comrades and use the grief as fire. They took tactics meant for annihilation and turned them into blueprints. Baser swirled gently. But why ban them? Zekstral's eyes darkened to deep violet. Because they don't fight the way we do. They don't seek balance, or glory, or resolution. They seek endings. Cold, efficient, final. They do not dance around honor. They tear it apart. Thriss buzzed, nervous. Is that why the decree was passed? Zekstral didn't answer. He only stood, and for the first time, looked smaller. Not in size, but in certainty. The council said it was for peace, he said finally. But I believe it was for fear. He moved to the window, gazing into the stars. Stop this search, he said. While you still can. They are not what you expect. And then, he turned away. Silent dismissal. Outside, in the corridor, they spoke nothing. But all felt it. They had not reached the end of the path. Only the edge of the beginning. The Academy's power station lay far from the shining towers and ceremonial halls. It crouched on the edge of the artificial gravity ring, humming with restrained energy, hidden in heat and shadow. The walls here sweated metal, and the air carried the scent of ionized dust and engine blood. Karenav stood at the entrance, hesitant for the first time. Beside her, Moxel's crystal body shimmered dully. Baser's mist twitched inside its suit, and Thriss hovered in tight formation, unusually still. They had searched for 2 days. No listings in the dormitories. No record in faculty files. Only a whispered trail that ended here, in the underbelly of the Academy, where things were maintained, not remembered. Colonel Vrock? Karenav called, her voice catching in the hum. We'd like to talk to you. For a moment, only machines answered. Then a shuffle. A slow scraping of limbs on metal. From behind a fusion coil emerged a shape no longer suited for glory. The being who once commanded legions now walked with a limp, his 4 legs dragging, carapace cracked, colors faded like an old battle flag left in acid rain. His eyes, once bright, had dulled to the color of rusted honor. No one calls me Colonel anymore, he rasped. Just Vrock now. What do students want with an old maintenance worker? Moxel stepped forward, direct. We're researching the human exclusion decree. Professor Zekstral said you fought in the Proxima Centauri conflict. Vrock's eyes narrowed. Leave now. That subject is not for class projects. But Karenav stepped closer, voice low. My family is from Proxima. My grandfather fought in that war. His name was Taliner. The old soldier stilled. His breath caught, clicking faintly. Taliner, he echoed. Yes. I remember him. Brave soldier. Silence lingered. Then a sigh. Fine. A short talk. But not here. He led them into a small break room carved into the power station's edge. Dim lights. A wall with tarnished metals, some so old their meanings were lost. Vrock sat heavily on a worn bench. What do you want to know about humans? Thriss hovered forward. Why are they banned from all galactic wars? Vrock's eyes didn't meet theirs. He stared past them, through time. They don't look special, he said slowly. Smaller than many species. No armor. No claws. No acid. They bleed. They break. We thought they'd be easy to use. Allies to control. Tools to direct. But they weren't, whispered Baser. Vrock's voice grew stronger. They were wrong. Different. In ways you can't measure with scans. We put them on the front lines. Cannon fodder. Shock troops. Disposable. He leaned forward now, eyes gleaming like a storm behind cracked glass. And they came back. The room grew still. We'd send 100 humans into hopeless battle, expecting none to survive. 60 would return. Dirty. Bleeding. But alive. Triumphant. They learned. From pain. From failure. From watching their friends fall. Every time they returned, they were smarter. Harder. Kiranav whispered, is that why they were banned? Because they were too good at war? Vrock laughed, a dry, empty sound. Good fighters? No. Many species are good fighters. He stood, slowly, voice rising. Humans were banned because they don't understand what war is supposed to be. To them, it's not strategy. It's not honor. It's not a dance of equals. It's not a noble loss. It's a disease. And they are the cure. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was terrifying. They don't follow doctrines. They rewrite them. They don't seek control. They seek ends. Final, sharp, immediate ends. He stopped. Eyes wide. A shiver ran down his frame. The Geneva suggestion, he muttered. They called it a suggestion. Creativity on the battlefield. Unexpected application. He turned sharply toward the door. This is enough. You've heard too much. But as security alarms echoed in the distance, and heavy footsteps approached, Vrock pressed something into Kiranav's hand. Go, he whispered. Quickly. Before they erase this too. They were escorted out moments later by silent guards. Questions were ignored. Explanations dismissed. Only once they reached the garden again did Kiranav open her scaled hand. Inside, hidden between the folds of her skin, was a data crystal. No markings. Cold to the touch. Thriss scanned it. A single file. A set of coordinates. A station, Thriss said. In the Oort cloud. Edge of human territory. Abandoned, officially. Unofficially, asked Moxel. Thriss's swarm pulsed. Still alive. They looked at each other. Whatever lay at those coordinates, it was not history. It was truth. The stars beyond the academy were cold, older than history, flickering like forgotten warnings. For 3 days, the borrowed trading vessel cut through the void, its hull wrapped in silence and doubt. The 4 students, Kiranav, Moxel, Thriss, and Baser, watched the darkness grow thicker as they neared the Oort cloud. No patrols. No beacons. Just coordinates and the echo of a secret buried by time. There, Baser whispered, a tendril of gas pressed to the viewport. A structure drifted in eternal stillness. Shaped like a fractured wheel, spokes stretching to a dark central hub, it turned ever so slightly as if still listening. No lights blinked from its windows. No transmissions. Yet when Thriss scanned it, they buzzed with unease. Power is active, barely. There are recent data pulses. Someone's been here, within months. Docking was slow. The ship's clamps groaned against the decaying airlock. Inside, dust greeted them like memories, layered, undisturbed, yet somehow freshly unsettled. The station came to life as they entered, lights flickered, systems pulsed. Not welcoming. Reacting. Watching. This was a research station, Moxel said, tracing a faded inscription. Comparative Species Analysis Division. The labs were strange. Tanks built to hold beings of different morphologies. Neural interfaces. Monitors shaped for eyes that no longer saw. Notes carved into hardened polymer sheets. Charts comparing baseline biological responses not just of other species, but always to humans. They were studying everything, Kirinev said. Pain thresholds. Emotional collapse. Decision-making under fear. Thriss hovered near a control panel. Tiny forms spread like liquid metal across its surface. I've found encrypted files. War records. Simulations. They're dated to humanity's last conflict. The screen flared. Footage. Silent battles replayed in gray and red. Human soldiers fighting in forests, ruins, void stations. Always fewer in number. Always surrounded. Yet never retreating like others would. They twisted terrain into weapons. Turned corpses into lures. Misdirected enemy targeting systems by painting symbols with their own blood. They used every part of the battlefield, Moxel murmured. Even the parts that weren't meant to be used. They stored tools inside themselves, Baser said slowly. Look, this footage. Prisoners swallowing lockpicks. Later, retrieving them. That's not war, Thriss said quietly. That's something else. One door remains sealed. Around it, warning signs in every language the galaxy knew. Some were etched by hand. Inside, a narrow hall with a single room, dimly lit, perfectly preserved. A museum. The walls displayed items behind shielded glass, vials of mutagenic gas, disruptors tuned to neural empathy fields, sonic devices that only affected parental instincts. A plaque read. Exhibit, War Crimes. Humanity. Last recorded designs. Kirinev's scales dimmed. These aren't weapons. They're punishments. They're messages, Moxel corrected. Tools to make enemies never want to return. At the far wall, a terminal blinked. On it, one file, locked and named simply. Operation Endgame. Thriss breached the lock. The file opened with no fanfare. No music. Just a series of command logs and timestamped visual records. The operation had occurred during the final days of the Proxima Centauri War. Coalition forces, including humans, had cornered the hegemony fleet near a ring of habitable moons. The plan was simple: advance slowly, surround, enforce surrender with minimal casualties. The humans refused. Instead, they initiated Endgame. They did not attack ships. They targeted oxygen processors on nearby moons. Shut down water recycling. Introduced engineered fungi into food stores that rendered them inedible. No explosions. No direct fire. Just entropy, turned into doctrine. Within hours, the hegemony collapsed, not militarily, but existentially. Kirinev's voice was hollow. They turned survival into strategy. They called it humane, said Baser. By killing the need to fight, before killing the body. The others didn't vote to ban them because of cruelty, Moxel said. They voted because humans refused to let war linger. Suddenly, red lights flared. Sirens howled through the station. Sterilization protocol initiated. Unauthorized access. Run! Thriss screamed, swarm exploding into emergency formation. They made it to the ship just as the station began to collapse, its own systems erasing what remained. From orbit, they watched beams of silent light crack through its structure, breaking the wheel into drifting ruin. Data lost forever, except what lived now in their memory. In the quiet of space, no one spoke. The truth was too loud. Humans were not banned because they were monstrous. They were banned because they refused to make war tolerable. Because they saw mercy not as hesitation but as efficiency. And to the galaxy, that was the most terrifying weapon of all. The chamber was circular, walled with silver and etched crystal, hidden deep beneath the Galactic War Academy, so deep that even light felt hesitant to enter. At its center stood a small figure. Human. Unarmed. Unspectacular. "I'm Catherine Shan," she said calmly, voice echoing off the panels. Earth Diplomatic Corps. 4 alien students stood before her in silence. Kirinav's scales shifted between tones of tension and disbelief. Moxel stood motionless, his crystal body reflecting fractured lights. Baser's vapors swirled low to the ground, and Thriss hovered in a careful formation, each tiny body buzzing at a slightly different frequency. She was ordinary. Brown skin. Black hair neatly tied. Simple blue uniform, Earth's insignia stitched quietly on the shoulder. No weapons. No armor. Just calm eyes and a composed smile. "This is the tactical simulation chamber," Catherine said, gesturing around them. "Today, we'll show you the Battle of Sigmat Draconis." From the upper tier, a council officer began the briefing. The students would command the Kortoth fleet, 30,000 soldiers with advanced weaponry, superior positioning, and full logistical support. Catherine would lead 500 human soldiers. "That's not a fair match," said Baser, mist flickering in alarm. "You're here," Catherine said, "to learn why fairness never mattered to us." The simulation engaged. Walls melted into stars. They were in the midst of a system surrounded by fractured moons and debris fields. Ships flickered into view, massive cruisers aligned under Kortoth control, sleek and confident. The humans had barely a dozen small vessels, some barely armed. They moved slowly, like wounded prey. At first, everything followed protocol. The student fleet closed ranks, flanked the smaller ships, initiated containment procedures. Tactically perfect. Textbook. Then Catherine moved. She abandoned key positions. Left open flanks. Allowed sections of her own line to fall apart. One of her ships exploded deliberately, scattering debris into a gravitational eddy that jammed Kortoth comms. The human fleet sent false surrender signals, drawing enemy cruisers into converging crossfire. More unnerving than the maneuvers were the tactics. Catherine directed fire at support vessels, not the combat ships, but those controlling oxygen supply, medical units, navigational backups. She disabled emergency escape systems on targeted ships, forcing Kortoth captains into panic. Rumors of betrayal spread through the enemy ranks, planted through spliced transmissions her AI embedded in their network. "This violates all war conventions," Moxel cried. "There are no conventions in extinction," Catherine replied. "Only outcomes." By the time the simulation ended, the Kortoth fleet was in disarray. Their soldiers scattered, leadership broken. The 500 humans, though down to 173 survivors, stood victorious. When the stars faded and the chamber returned to silver stillness, no one spoke. The students stared at her, not in awe, but with the fragile quiet of those who had glimpsed something they weren't ready to name. Catherine broke the silence. That was basic human doctrine. We don't outnumber. We outthink. We outlast. We outbreak you. But why? Kirinav finally asked. Why fight this way? Why not honor code limits? Catherine's smile faded. Because we learned the cost of those things. We fought for centuries following rules. And our cemeteries overflowed with people who died honorably, but in vain. When we stopped glorifying war, we started winning. Later, they were taken to a sealed viewing room. The council had granted access to the final record, the last human-led battle before the ban. Proxima Centauri. Operation Endgame. The footage played without drama. No music. No narration. Just raw data. The hegemony fleet was surrounded. Victory was inevitable within days if protocol was followed. But humans didn't wait. They destroyed the moons that sustained hegemony life. Cut off oxygen, water, power. The enemy collapsed in hours, not weeks. They didn't just defeat them, Baser murmured. They erased their ability to resist. And called it mercy, Thriss added, stunned. The council, in that recording, voted unanimously to ban humans from war. Not for cruelty, but for efficiency that went too far. For strategies too cold to fit inside a just galaxy. When the lights returned, Catherine stood alone in front of the screen. We were banned not because we are monsters, she said, but because we refuse to make war sacred. We tear the poetry from it. We end it, even if it breaks us. Back in the garden under artificial stars, the students gathered around her one last time. You saw the weapons, Catherine said softly. The tactics. But what you haven't seen is what it took to create that mindset. We had no claws. No fangs. Just minds. So we turned everything into a weapon. Even kindness. Even silence. Kindness? Moxel echoed. She nodded. We'd feed enemy civilians. Heal their children. Not because we were pure. But because it shook their armies more than any cannon ever could. The stars above seemed dimmer. You support the ban? Kiranav asked. We understand it, Catherine answered. We don't want to fight again. But if ever, a true enemy comes. One that doesn't follow rules. One that doesn't fear death. She paused. Call us. Weeks later, the council renewed the human exclusion decree. 1 more century. But with a single amendment. If the day comes when survival outweighs civilization, Earth may be summoned. In the records, it was written without drama. Just a line of text in the Galactic law. But to those who understood, it was the galaxy's last safeguard. The final justification. You've seen the evidence. You've watched the simulation. And now you know. Humans weren't banned because they broke the rules, but because they never believed in them to begin with. So tell us. Would you trust a species that views mercy as strategy? That sees kindness as a tool? That ends wars by ending the possibility of resistance? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Because your voice is part of this investigation. Subscribe to follow the next case file. Share this story if it shook your view of war. And remember, when peace is no longer an option, there's one last door left to knock on. Earth. And they always